Welcome back to XRP Matrix. If you're holding XRP right now, you need to pay very close attention to what we're about to cover because a pattern that has only appeared twice before in XRP's modern history has just returned for a third time. The reason this matters is simple. The last two times this exact setup appeared, XRP didn't just recover, it delivered some of the biggest moves ever seen in its market cycle. And now investors are asking a serious question. If history repeats itself, could holding 6,250 XRP today potentially put someone in position for a portfolio value exceeding $50,000 in the next major cycle? Before we get started, remember that nothing in this video is financial advice. Always do your own research, but if you love deep XRP analysis backed by historical market behavior instead of hype and emotion, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to XRP Matrix. Now let's break down why thousands of XRP holders are suddenly paying attention to a signal most investors completely ignore. What has everyone's attention is the 200-week moving average. Now don't click away if that sounds technical, because this indicator is actually very simple. Think of it as XRP's long-term center of gravity. Instead of measuring days or weeks, it measures nearly 4 years of price history and shows where XRP has traded on average throughout an entire market cycle. When XRP trades above this level, markets are usually optimistic and expanding. When XRP falls below it, markets are usually experiencing maximum fear, maximum uncertainty, and maximum pessimism. That is exactly why investors watch it. The interesting part is not the indicator itself. The interesting part is what happened after XRP moved below it in the past. History doesn't guarantee future results, but historical behavior can provide valuable context. And when you look at XRP's previous reactions to this setup, the numbers become impossible to ignore. Let's go back to late 2020. At that time, XRP was struggling. Sentiment was weak. Most investors had already lost interest. News coverage had faded. Social media engagement was nowhere near what it is today. Many people believed XRP's best days were behind it, yet beneath the surface, something important was happening. XRP was trading below its long-term structural average. To most people, that looked bearish. To patient investors studying historical cycles, it looked like compression. And compression often comes before expansion. Once XRP regained strength and moved through that period of weakness, the asset exploded from below 30 cents to approximately $1.65. That represented roughly an 8 times move from the lows. The people who positioned themselves before sentiment changed captured the majority of that move. The people who waited for headlines and confirmation arrived much later after a significant portion of the gains had already occurred. Then came the second major example. The year was 2022, and the crypto industry was dealing with one of the darkest periods in its history. Fear was everywhere, confidence was collapsing, major companies were struggling, and the collapse of FTX sent shockwaves through the entire digital asset market. Investors were panicking, critics declared crypto finished, financial media outlets were filled with negative predictions. According to the dominant narrative at the time, recovery seemed unlikely. Yet something fascinating was happening beneath the headlines. XRP once again found itself trading around a historically compressed zone relative to its long-term average. The environment looked terrible, but markets often create opportunities when emotions reach extremes. What happened next surprised many people. XRP eventually climbed to around $3.66, producing a move that exceeded 10 times from its compressed lows. Once again, maximum pessimism was followed by significant upside. Now let's pause for a moment because this is where things become interesting. Today, XRP has once again revisited this long-term structural area. This marks the third occurrence of a pattern that has historically preceded major recoveries. Does that guarantee another explosive move? Absolutely not. Markets never provide guarantees. But investors who study cycles know that repeating conditions deserve attention. The reason many analysts are discussing this setup isn't because they're predicting the future, it's because they recognize that similar conditions produced powerful outcomes in the past. The market is essentially presenting a familiar environment. Whether the result ends up being smaller, larger, or completely different remains unknown. But the fact that the same structural signal has appeared for a third time is enough to make serious investors stop and pay attention. Another reason this conversation is gaining traction is because the pattern wasn't unique to XRP. Similar long-term compression signals appeared across major cryptocurrencies during previous market cycles. Bitcoin experienced them. Ethereum experienced them. Other leading digital assets experienced them as well. That's important because it suggests we're not looking at a random XRP-specific anomaly. Instead, we may be observing a broader market behavior that occurs whenever fear reaches extreme levels across the crypto asset class. Markets move in cycles. Optimism eventually becomes excess. Excess eventually becomes correction. Correction eventually becomes fear. and fear eventually creates the conditions for recovery. Understanding where we are within that cycle can be more valuable than reacting emotionally to short-term headlines. Let's talk about the numbers because this is where many XRP holders become excited. Looking at prior cycle performance, one completed cycle delivered approximately 8 times growth from compressed levels. Another delivered more than 10 times growth. Some analysts use those historical multiples as a framework to understand potential future scenarios. Not predictions, not guarantees, just mathematical exercises based on previous market behavior. If XRP were to produce a move similar to the last major cycle, some calculations suggest prices could move significantly higher than current levels. Again, nobody knows exactly where XRP will go. But when investors compare current conditions to prior cycles, it's easy to understand why conversations about larger valuations continue to dominate the XRP community. That brings us to the famous 6,250 XRP question. Why is that specific number attracting attention? Because investors have started applying historical cycle math to a position of that size. If someone owns 6,250 XRP and future price appreciation resembles previous major cycle expansions, the portfolio value could potentially exceed $50,000. Some estimates even produce larger numbers depending on future market conditions. But here's the key point. These figures are illustrations, not promises. They're based on hypothetical scenarios using historical multipliers. The purpose isn't to predict exact outcomes. The purpose is to help investors visualize what large percentage gains could mean for a real portfolio. Understanding that distinction is incredibly important because too many people confuse possibility with certainty. For long-term investors, this discussion isn't really about numbers on a screen. It's about what those numbers represent. For some people, an investment gain could mean reducing debt. For others, it could mean helping pay for education, supporting family members, building retirement security, or creating additional financial flexibility. That's why these conversations generate so much emotion. Every XRP holder has a different reason for being here. Some are looking for life-changing gains. Some are looking for portfolio diversification. Others simply believe in Ripple's long-term vision and the utility of the XRP ledger. Whatever the motivation may be, understanding historical context allows investors to make more informed decisions instead of reacting purely to market noise. One of the most overlooked aspects of investing is the emotional challenge. It's easy to hold an asset when prices are rising. It's much harder when prices remain compressed for months or years. Many XRP holders understand this better than anyone. They've watched bullish headlines come and go. They've watched bearish headlines come and go. They've experienced periods of excitement followed by periods of frustration. Yet history shows that major opportunities often emerge during the moments when confidence is lowest. The investors who benefited most from previous cycles weren't necessarily the smartest traders. Often they were simply the people who maintained conviction during periods when everyone else was giving up. That doesn't mean every investment succeeds. It means patience has historically been rewarded more often than panic. Something else worth discussing is how narratives change. During market bottoms, the dominant story is usually negative. People focus on risks, failures, and worst-case scenarios. During market tops, the dominant story becomes overwhelmingly positive. People focus on opportunities, growth, and limitless upside. Yet the most profitable decisions are often made when investors learn to separate narratives from data. The reason the 200-week moving average receives attention is because it offers a structural perspective rather than an emotional one. It doesn't care about headlines. It doesn't care about social media arguments. It simply reflects where price has traded throughout an entire market cycle. And historically, periods of deep compression have eventually been followed by periods of expansion. Another factor supporting XRP's long-term narrative is the continued development occurring around Ripple, institutional interest, and blockchain-based financial infrastructure. While price action captures most headlines, serious investors often pay attention to adoption trends, technology improvements, regulatory developments, and ecosystem growth. Markets don't move based on a single factor. They move because multiple variables align over time. That's why many XRP supporters remain focused on the bigger picture. They're watching how digital asset regulation evolves. They're watching payment infrastructure developments. They're watching global interest in blockchain efficiency. And they're watching whether XRP can continue positioning itself within that changing financial landscape. At the same time, responsible investors understand the risks. Historical patterns can fail. Market conditions can change. Global economic factors can influence outcomes. Regulatory decisions can impact sentiment. Competition within the crypto industry continues to grow. No indicator, no chart pattern, and no analyst can predict the future with complete accuracy. That's why successful investing requires balancing optimism with realism. The goal isn't blind belief. The goal is informed decision-making. Historical data provides clues, not guarantees, and the smartest investors recognize the difference between a compelling setup and a guaranteed result. As we approach the second half of this year, the central question remains the same. Are current conditions similar enough to previous cycle lows to justify the growing excitement among XRP holders? That is ultimately what the market will decide. What we do know is that the 200-week moving average has once again entered the conversation. We know previous occurrences were followed by significant appreciation. We know thousands of investors are monitoring the same signal. And we know XRP continues to remain one of the most discussed assets in the crypto market. Whether the next chapter resembles previous cycles or creates an entirely new path remains to be seen. So now I want to hear from you. Do you believe the third appearance of this long-term pattern could lead to another major XRP breakout? Or do you think this cycle will unfold differently from the previous two? And if XRP eventually revisits the kind of growth seen during past expansions, what would that mean for your goals and future plans? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I read every single one. If you enjoyed this analysis, make sure you like this video, subscribe to XRP Matrix, and turn on notifications so you never miss an important XRP update. Thanks for watching, stay informed, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next one.